Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting live from our Sanctum Sanctorum in Venice, California. This is the Sixth Sense Society. I'm your host, Krista, here with our producer, Michael, and today we welcome on the show Diane Zangali, and she is going to talk about the Knights Templar. She is the Grand Cancellaria of the Fraternity of the Hidden Light, a Knights Templar herself and a Continental Mason. She also has a fascinating balance of Eastern knowledge as well, and she has studied and lived in Japan for 17 years, and there she got her 5th Dan Aikido and is also an initiate of Mikyo Shingon Zen. And she is also a retired engineer, electrical engineer, and she got her bachelor's and master's degree at MIT. So before we get started, however, with this amazing and fascinating topic, Michael has a few announcements.
Hi, everybody, and thanks again for tuning into our show. We always love having you guys here, and please click and subscribe and leave comments and so forth, and it really does help us more than anything else you guys can do. Get all the information on our show on our website, sixthsensesociety.com, SIXTH, and while you're there, you can leave us a coffee on Ko-Fi if you feel so inclined, and subscribe to our newsletter, so we'll let you know about upcoming shows and things like that. We have some really great shows coming up in the next couple of weeks. We have next week Amanda Limpert, and she is the owner of the blog Spooky Eats, and she's a foodie that travels around all kinds of inns and cafes and haunted bed and breakfast, and so that's going to be a lot of fun. And then Carrie Calvis at the end of the month, who is a numerologist, and we will be doing a show on numerology, which is to, divine the will of God through numbers. And she'll be talking about some of her own unique methods that she's developed and so forth with that. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And then we have some really great stuff coming up the following month. We're going to have our first big 2-hour paranormal special with a lot of our paranormal friends and all kinds of things. So check it out. Go to the website and you can get all the information. And then we are also, I always forget to mention, we are going to be doing a series of tarot classes starting in May. So if you are interested in learning to read the tarot, or even if you're very experienced and just want to have a different perspective, it should be a lot of fun, and it'll be done by Zoom. So wherever you are, you can do it online with us. And so just contact us if you want more information on that as well. So I'm going to kick it back to you guys, and I'm really excited about the Knights Templar because I grew up in Nova Scotia, and it's a big part of our mythology and history from where I come from. So I can't wait to hear what we have to talk about. So take it away, Krista.
Great. Thanks so much, Michael. And welcome, Diane. We're so happy to have you on today.
Thank you for having me.
You have, I love your background. It's such an interesting, diverse mix, and I think that's always creates a very unique person.
It's my living room. That's my fireplace and a Shinto shrine up on top, and a mix of things. Yeah.
Yeah. And I noticed too, you started your path quite early in life, in the 70s, early 70s.
That's true. I was a freshman at MIT at 19, and I had joined a women's self-defense group. And while I was there, I ran into a bunch of Dianic Wiccans, and I went to find out more. The Dianic Wicca was not for me, but I found a Wiccan group nearby, was initiated, and they promptly turned into working ceremonial magic with a Rosicrucian Golden Dawn based system. So I'm still in that tradition, but that was back in 73. So it's been a while.
Yeah, that's such a good, I love that story. That's great. Now, I'm curious how you ever became interested in the Knights Templar. When was the first time you sort of found yourself fascinated with them?
Well, it was interesting. As you know, I do esoteric Zen Buddhism, And our grand master of that style, who was here, he's Japanese and he's a Mason. And he asked me if I knew any esoteric Masons. And I asked, I happened to be, when the question came in, Timothy Hogan was one of our speakers at the Fraternity of Hidden Lights, annual conclave. And I asked him, hey, do you know any esoteric Masons that I can introduce an esoteric Buddhist to? And he gave me the name of John Parsons and the local Templar priory, and right in my neighborhood. So that's how I first connected with the Templars, and it's been an interesting group.
So I know that many people watching probably know a little bit about who the Knights Templar were, but why don't you share a little bit of their history for the new people that might not?
Well, there's a public history for the Templars and an inner history that of the tradition. Most people think that the Templar order was formed in 1100 and went into the Crusades and was tasked with protecting the pilgrims who were going to the Holy Land. And the public tradition has it that they were suppressed in 1304. But actually, the group started way before that and continues to this day. They went underground when they were suppressed.
So what is some of the evidence of their earlier origins that you know of?
Well, I recommend a book, The Way of the Templar by Timothy Hogan, which has some of the history. And they within the tradition, there are documents showing that the group formed much earlier. They just didn't go public.
And I know that you've mentioned Timothy Hogan a couple times, and who is he exactly?
Oh, he's the Grand Master of the Templar Collegia, and there are several lineages of Knights Templar that have come down, and he's one of them, one of the lineages of the Knights Templar. And so he's also speaks on Masonic issues, things.
So by lineage, do you mean that they claim a lineage to the Knights Templar, the inner Templar, or the outer order, or the more public one? What is their sort of claim?
Well, the public one was, it's one order, but it wasn't in public view. The same way there were Masons way before the formation of the first Grand Lodges in the 1700s. There's evidence of Masonic lodges going back to the 1500s. So it's a matter of being in public that as a tradition and it being in existence secretly prior and after the suppression.
So was the secrecy even before that out of necessity? Was it one of those, because I'm sure afterwards it would have been out of necessity, it seems like.
Well, I think that there's a lot of secrecy just because it like in most esoteric traditions, there are orders that have a long lineage, but they're not in the public. They're not publicly accepting members. They're not public orders. They're more of a secret society.
Now, I don't know a lot about the more historical Knights Templar, but my understanding is they were really very austere monks as well, and they lived by a code. Some of which was they were supposed to give all their possessions to the order itself, so that they didn't own it, and they were very poor. which seems very ironic as they became incredibly wealthy. And
yeah, they were known as the poor knights of Christ.
Right.
Yeah. And they did, I guess they were the first start of like international banking, et cetera. I mean, they protected pilgrims who were traveling to the Holy Land. And so there were, they collected fees for doing that.
And you, before the show, we were talking about that, and you'd mentioned that they also protected all people, all pilgrims, not just Christians.
Correct. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to set up base on the Temple of the Mount. I mean, in the Dome of the Rock. I mean, they've been in contact. Their main purpose was to find esoteric knowledge in various traditions and collect it and protect it from being lost. And so they were in touch with the Sufis and the Druze and Cathar, Druid, Jewish, Gnostic traditions, a lot of traditions that had alchemical knowledge, building knowledge. I mean, that's why they became the cathedral builders. And after they were suppressed, the cathedral building pretty much stopped. And if you look at the cathedrals, they have images of Templars and alchemy and astrology and all these other symbols, Masonic symbols as well.
I read somewhere online they once owned the island of Cyprus. They had so much money that, of course, that was somewhat of their undoing, as history shows. And can you share a little bit about what actually happened that caused the suppression of the Templars?
Yeah, I think the French king owed them too much money, and he wanted to get out of the debt and to seize their lands and properties. And so he got together with the Pope, and they accused them of all sorts of heresies, and used that as the excuse to suppress the order. But the Templars were aware it was coming. They knew ahead of time. So there's something like only 20% of the group was actually rounded up. All the assets and all the, they had moved their assets and most of their people out in 18 ships and went into hiding before the suppression. So, and after the suppression, they fled all over the place. Many of them became stonemasons. They changed their flags on their ships. They joined other orders like the Hospitaliers. So it was they went underground when the suppression happened, and it happened because the French king wanted their wealth. He didn't get it though.
That's one of the most famous stories is the burning of Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master, which is what I first learned when my husband became a Mason. I learned about that story. I think everybody does, and that when he was burned at the stake, what he said about the Pope and King Philip.
And they were both dead within a year.
Yeah, he said that, and that's pretty extraordinary. Why do you think he stayed? Was it just sort of like his duty as the Grand Master to sort of see things through?
Well, I believe he was older, and they had hopes of reversing it. They didn't expect it to go the way it went. But I know over the years there were attempts to reverse the ban, and I believe the I forget which Pope in more recent history had removed the ban on them for the heresy. But the Templars didn't expect it to go the way it went, and there are the Grand Master. There was another Grand Master appointed. I mean, there's a lineage of Grand Masters going all the way since the suppression as well.
So who followed him? Jacques du Molay. Who was the Grand Master? Do you know?
Well, they were underground and it was secret. I don't have. I know that I've read in one of the books I've read. There is a a list of all the in the lineage of who was next and who was next and who was next, and that would be a good question for Timothy Hogan. I don't have that off the top of my head.
No worries. Now, in the Knights Templar, originally there were no women in the order. Is that correct, or was that another thing?
No,
that
that's not correct. There were women and men in the order. It was originally formed in 1096 in Constantinople in a church called the Church of Saints Sergius and Bacchus that had been built in 527 CE. And it later became the Templar Commandery and remained that way until 1314, and it's now a mosque. So,
and what were their roles? I understand even the men had different roles, and not every Knights Templar was a knight. There were different tasks and different roles. And what roles did the women play?
Well, there were women knights. There were women with swords. Think Joan of Arc. I mean, there were women involved in all aspects. I mean, and the Templars were also connected with the Cathars and other Gnostics, which treated women quite equally.
Sure.
So.
Sure. Yeah, the Gnostics, I know, especially did at that point. So now going back to after they fled, I know that one of the theories is Scotland because of Roslin, the cathedral. And what other places do you think they fled to? What do you know?
Well, there's evidence of Templars in the New World, the Kensington Runestone. Then also things going to in Newfoundland and I think there's one in Rhode Island. These beehive-shaped buildings and towers and things with Templar symbols on them. And the Templars had connections with various American Indians. It's interesting when Lewis and Clark went to we're going across the U.S. and meeting various indigenous people. They had aprons and similar symbols and passwords that were recognized, Masonic symbols, and that helped them make connections. So that they believe goes back to when the Templars were there early on.
Oh, that's really fascinating. I didn't know that. I really like that. So in the modern day Knights Templar, it does seem like there's a variety of organizations. And could you share a little bit with the organization that I think there was two that you're involved in, but one for sure I remember.
There's two that I had been active in. There's Circes, which they've changed its name to I think they're the Templar Research Institute now. Mm-hmm. And Timothy Hogan had been there. And now I'm in Templar Collegia, which is a group that Tim is the Grand Master. And that's the group that I had met back when I started as a Templar, through that chance meeting of connecting an esoteric Buddhist with an esoteric Mason. See what happened.
Not a chance, probably, not a coincidence.
There are no coincidences. There are, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true for the spiritual path for sure. I feel that same way actually. And so
synchronicities.
Yes, synchronicity is. It is. I was really interested in the fact that it was an esoteric Buddhist that connected you to the two. I hadn't heard that one before, and it makes you realize just how pervasive some of these groups were that we just didn't know about until they start talking to each other.
Yeah. I mean, I'd been brought up in a non-religious Catholic family. I mean, I became Wiccan at 19, and I hadn't really, I wasn't that familiar with Christian tradition. And then in meeting the Gnostic sanctuary, Rosamond here in our area in Redwood City, there's a lot of Isean energy there. Isis, priestess, Egyptian Isis, and there's a lot of goddess energy. And I think the Templars also had a lot of goddess energy. So it's like it felt like coming home.
Now, in the modern Templars, what is at least the Templar Collegia? What is basically their mission, and what are they trying to accomplish?
Well, if you're trying to make yourself a better person, it's very similar to Masonry. You're working on service, you're working on development, you're working on your skills. There are various ways you can do it. There's study, there's again, familiarity with these esoteric traditions. It's a path to develop yourself, to become better.
And do they have degrees or initiations in their traditions, such as, a lot of the orders do of their own kind?
Yes, but I can't talk about them.
Of course. And are they open to all people in terms of, race and religion and similar? I know the Masons, yep. The Masons are. And do they have like a criteria, for instance, the Masons, that you have to believe in some kind of supreme being? That's one of their criteria.
Well, that depends on which Masonry you're in. Continental Masonry, the French Masons, you don't have to believe in a supreme being. But you have to be working to become a better person. That's mm-hmm. so there isn't the you have to believe in God, goddess or God or whatever. It depends on which branch of Masonry you're in.
Now I understand that the York Rite in Masonry has something connected to the Knights Templar too. Now, I don't know obviously much about it, but just in my sort of reading of the Knights Templar, it was kind of mentioned. And are you familiar with that?
Well, I'm my Masonry background is Scottish Rite because it's continental Masonry, so I'm not that familiar with York Rite. And again, in most regular Masonry, women aren't allowed as members, so I really don't know what the details of that tradition.
And for those of you that don't know sort of regular Masonry, that Michael, maybe you want to jump in and just sort of mention what that is, since you probably have a better definition than I do.
Yeah, I mean, there's two really different branches in Freemasonry, and one is built around the York Rite, one is built around the Scottish Rite. The York Rite is the older, and basically it's British Freemasonry. So that was the one that really did start in Scotland and evolved into the Grand Lodge of England in the 1700s. And then the Scottish Rite is actually French Freemasonry. So it has absolutely nothing to do with Scotland, even though it's called the Scottish Rite, although it does use Scottish kind of symbolism. And part of the reason for that was, again, in France in those days, all things Scottish were like, it was a romantic thing as in Native Americans here. So it kind of became their thing, and so it became the Scottish Rite. And they do have a small elements of Scottish culture in it, I guess, for lack of a better word, but really no connection to Scotland as such. The actual Scottish one is honestly the Royal Arch.
Thank you. Yes, that's Michael is a past master of Sunset Lodge. I thought he might make a quick sort of statement about that. But
Michael might also have an answer to your question about Knights Templar degrees in regular Masonry, because I don't know.
Well, there is a Knights Templar now. It's a dubious connection at best. And there was a fellow running around France who was entertaining crowds with his oratory skills and giving speeches, and he realized that they were very into it, so he kind of made the connection. But from an actual scholarly point of view, it's a pretty big leap of faith to suggest that it's actually a lineage. So, but it is part of the The Royal Arch, yes. There's several organizations beyond Freemasonry. The first 3 degrees are the Blue Lodge, and then you have to be the Royal Arch is the next big degree beyond that, the Royal Arch degree itself. And then beyond that, there are cryptic Masons, there's the Knights Templar thing, and so forth. And sometimes I think these organizations were because when people became a past master of a Blue Lodge, they kind of reached their pinnacle and they still wanted to be in charge of something. So they created all these orders as a way of still being important. So, because I really think the foundation of the Blue Lodge is really Freemasonry, and everything beyond that is my humble opinion, relatively wonderful, but relatively frivolous.
There you have it. So I did want to ask just your own personal opinion. Why do you think that the public is so really enthralled by the Knights Templar? You'll see, like in the culture, the imagery, there's a romance around it when you look at their order. It seemed kind of tough to be a Knights Templar, if you ask me. They were very dedicated.
Yeah, I think there's also a romance, modern day, against medieval things. Like the fictional shows that are out there that have kings and queens and armies and things going on. But I think what really fascinates me about it is I've always been drawn to esoteric and the occult. And the esoteric knowledge, the fact that they had connections with preserving those traditions of alchemy, and even they, from what I hear, the Zohar from the Jewish Kabbalistic book, that Zohar text was found in a jar in the desert by the Knights Templar, and they couldn't read it. And instead of giving it to the church, they got it over to a Jewish community in Spain to translate. And that became the Zohar and gave us the information about the Tree of Life, and the Kabbalah all came from there.
Oh, that's really fascinating. So would you think then, obviously there's a lot of sort of theory around the lost treasure of the Templars. Where is it? What is it? Would your opinion be that it could be kind of a mix of like gold and silver and books and objects that are sacred?
I think it's knowledge. It's knowledge. And I don't think if there was, stashes of people escaping, it's probably not all in one place, But I'm sure that the order survived and kept on after the suppression.
So in the Templar group that you belong to, is it primarily what you study? Is it more based on the Western occult background, or does it have an influence from different kinds of traditions? Because it sounds like the Templars were protecting all different types of sacred texts and sacred traditions.
Yeah, well, actually, we when we meet in Priory, we run discussion groups and we work on various things, and it's an interesting community to be in, to discuss these topics and work with. And our group has a series of, if you join and work the system, there are books that you use to actually, of information. So it's very interesting to me. But as you mentioned, I've been involved in many traditions, and I'm active in many. And I look at it as, there's one universe and one mountain to the light, and there's many paths up that mountain depending on how you get there. And they work together. So I find the things that I've learned in doing, say, the fire ritual for Shingon Buddhism, and the chanting and the discipline for that helps my working in ritual for Western mysteries tradition and Hermetic tradition. So they work together.
Well, and that's interesting, because there's definitely and this is just, everyone has a right to their opinion, obviously. But I've heard other people say it's almost better to stay in either the Western or Eastern tradition because they're so different. Now, I'm like you. I haven't gone as deeply into the Western tradition, maybe in the same way you have, but I work with both Eastern and Western, and I like it. And I've just thought, I'm just going to do it because that's me, and it benefits me. I'm a better person. When I was stopped doing my mantras, I felt a big difference, and not a good way. So I've made peace with it. But I could see that point of view. But it sounds like you've been able to integrate the different worlds in a way that you feel is helping you.
Well, I think I went really deep in one tradition before I was exposed to the other tradition, and then went deep in that, seeing similarities. So it's not like dabbling.
Mm-hmm.
I think whatever tradition you work with, you need to go deep in it to get the benefit of it. You can't just pull, this ritual and that ritual from different places, and that's not usually encouraged. But you should go deep into anything to study.
I totally agree with that, because I would say I did the same thing. I was only really immersed I started out early with Tibetan Buddhism, and I only did that well into, I don't know, for about 10 years. Only really started getting introduced to Western esoteric after that. I think I didn't know much at all, except for maybe a little astrology, and all my friends were Buddhist at the time. And then I kind of delved into that in my own way for quite a while. Mostly Michael and I, it's been through the tarot, has taken us, because of the tarot, it introduces you, if you let it will introduce you to all kinds of things, including Kabbalah,
mm-hmm.
which for me was interesting, since I have a Jewish background that was never really encouraged, because my father decided not to raise us Jewish, and my mother was Catholic, and she didn't want to raise us Catholic. So we weren't raised anything, in a sense, and I think in a way it was fairly liberating for me that I could pick my own path at the time I really wanted to. But I can see where, and I think everyone's different. Like you said, there are many paths to the truth, and I think is going deeply and committing yourself, I think, is probably one of the most important things, whichever the path is.
The most important thing is working with the symbolic keys that speak to you. Like when I started in my first magical order, we were working Greek and Egyptian god forms on the Tree of Life. And so I had nothing really to do with Hebrew or tarot till I started working with Fraternity of Hidden Light. They're the same archetypes in different ways, but it's a matter of, you have to pick what speaks to you. I mean, some people, Norse will do it for them.
Mm-hmm.
You have to work with where your passion is, because I think the key to magic is the symbols speak directly to your subconscious, and that's where the connections are made. It's not in text. It's not in what you read and study. It's in what symbolic keys open you up by working with symbols. And so you need to find your own inner voice and which symbols speak to it and speak to you. And that's how you should guide what your tradition will be.
I think that's excellent advice. And I think it's a very powerful way to not only choose a path, but the symbols will start to come up in your life organically and synchronistically, which I've always been hugely fascinated by, that the way the universe relates to us in our own language esoterically. You'll see what makes sense to you as someone on the path.
Well, that's why tarot works, is even if you just work with the cards, the symbols on them will affect you, whether consciously or not.
It's so true.
It's
and the tarot is a great teacher, because what I have found when we started, I didn't really know much about tarot history or the tarot occult, or I was, I've always been fascinated. I have a metaphysical father, and I've been, following a path that's somewhat metaphysical my whole life in different ways, and just fell in love with the tarot as the imagery, without knowing anything. And when I think about what it led me to, really, I can say it was working with the symbols that made me curious about something or opened up something inside of me. And it is remarkable how our subconscious does really relate to the symbols, and how powerful it is to change one's life.
I think one of the key things of why you do magical work is, you want to become an adept means that you have made that connection to your own inner voice and have that guidance, and it's personal. It's each person's different. It's like the Hierophant card. Your intuition. That's what guides you, and each person. You can't get it someone else telling you. You can't get it from a fossilized tradition. You get it. It's got to be alive. It's got to be magic. It's got to be your own living tradition, and then that evolves. So that's an important key to magical work.
Now, in the Knights Templar group you're involved in, is there any sort of mentorship, or does like, let's say I go in and I'm a complete beginner. Let's say I really have not a lot of knowledge about anything. Is there someone that would work with somebody in terms of just helping them to help them with progress, or is it more just sort of a broad sort of way of working with people?
Well, each group, we haven't been meeting in person in since quarantine, but people, we'd meet once a month, or and you talk, you discuss, you help each other understand the topic, and so there is mentorship, and it's in the dynamics of the group. It's a nice supportive environment.
So it sounds like there's quite a bit of discussion and study of different topics. And is that true also of FLO? I know that Dan has been on the show before, and we've had Christopher, who's also part of that group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we in FLO, there's the study groups, which are open to the public. Go to lvx.org/calendar to see everything that's coming up. And we have one going on now about Hermetic alchemy. There's an astrology group. There's tarot. There's various other study groups where are open discussions with experienced people. But there's also if you become initiated into the order, then it's I think your standard Rosicrucian Golden Dawn style of there are initiations at various levels where you do various things. It's ritual work with a group. They're secrets. I can't tell you about the ritual itself, because actually the worst thing you can do to someone who's about to be initiated is have them know ahead of time what the initiation is going to be, or it won't have the effect it's supposed to have.
Right.
It's a like Masonic initiation, similar. You don't. There's that element. So there's two elements. There's the study that's public, and then there's ritual work, and we also have a probationers program for people who may be interested in joining, and it's a series of courses that you can. We just moved to a new platform where you can download lessons, upload homework and tests, and be mentored and work through basic foundation of esoteric knowledge to get you ready to join a lodge. And if that's your path.
That's wonderful. Now, again, this is mostly from your own experience, since you've been involved for very many years in, working on the inner self and really becoming your truer self. What do you think, from your experience, are some of the signs that you're actually making progress that a person could actually see, you know, because I think sometimes it's hard for us to evaluate ourselves fairly, both positively and negatively, but mostly from your own experience. What do you think could be some of the signs?
Well, one way to describe it, you know, in a non-magical way, is it's like integration of the personality of the different components. So you can tell someone's making progress when they get past that small personal ego and start, you know, realize, you could, you know, the big red flag is if somebody makes you really angry, one finger's pointing that way and the other three are pointing back at you. You need to, it's showing you what areas of yourself you need to deal with and balance. And as you work your way up the tree of life, or work with the archetypal symbols, are methods to balance the personality, which gets you into the point where you can work with that inner intuition and develop that sense of what you need to do next. You know, there's a magical axiom: when in doubt, do nothing. Because the other part of that is, when you know, you know. There's no logic, you know, it's not a logical thing you figure out, but if you need to go in a particular direction, you'll know it. And I guess I've been lucky. I've always had that sense, which is how I ended up in Japan. But it's a matter of you're at each point in time, you're at a crossroads, and you'll know if there's something you need to do.
Now, in the modern day,
sense.
no, it makes perfect sense. In the modern day, we all have been forced, for instance, to do more virtual classes and teachings, and we've had some discussions with Lon Milo Duquette about magic moving into the virtual world in a very positive way, and he feels pretty strongly about it, and I think has been experimenting with even rituals. What is your thoughts about that?
Well, right now you can do guided meditation easily on a Zoom meeting or so, but it's ritual itself is difficult, I think. I have done, I'm in an ISIS circle, and we actually work ritual online by having each person in their own temple doing their part and reading the ritual, but we're all on screen because we can't be in the same room. And it works. But I don't know. I think the one thing that this pandemic has done is make people really reevaluate what's important. Why are we here? Why are we doing this? Because, when you're caught up in your day-to-day, go to work every day, you maybe not have had the time to reevaluate what's really important. And that's been a big shift that this pandemic has brought.
Yeah, I think that is very true from what I can tell from a lot of talk and my friends and different people we've talked to on as guests as well. I agree with you. And I think that obviously people still want to meet in person at some point because there's nothing that replaces it. But I think there's a value in all of it, and for me, for instance, I did go to some Buddhist meetings because it was easier for my schedule even to just participate, and it allows you to even go to different states and places you'd be interested in, so it can open up possibilities for the future, I think.
Yeah, and I love the stuff Lon's doing. I when I was visiting once a month, come see my dad, I used to go to his Monday night magic class regularly, but they've been on Zoom for the last year at least.
Yes, no, we love him. He's just a really wonderful person, and he's very he's very inclusive and enthusiastic. The thing I always find after talking to him, I feel so enthusiastic about magic, and that kind of contagious enthusiasm, to me personally, from any teacher, is always a good sign. Is that they're connected and they're doing something certainly they still feel passionate about. And of course, he's, like you, he's been doing these things for many, many years and has a lot to offer. But getting back a little to the Knights Templar, I think it's fascinating to me, the warrior aspect of, since you yourself studied Aikido, and there is the path, the spiritual warrior, that is, talked about in different traditions, in which, in some ways, I like that archetype myself, for helping me in my regular life, and not so much, even though I've done some martial arts, and fencing was my favorite. I would have kept that going, but I could not afford it. When I moved from Nova Scotia, I did some fencing because it was part of my school program. It was like $30 a semester, and we had the greatest fencing coaches, and it was just so much fun. and it was hard. Oh my God, it was. I was in my 30s when I started, so I was not. I was having to compete with very young, vigorous athletes, but it was still so much fun. I learned so much, and but I think for me personally, there is something archetypal about, not that I want to go out and kill infidels, but that archetype of the warrior with the Knights Templar that I think can be important for certain people in their lives, having to learn a warrior's code and what it means to stand up for injustices, which is one of the things they were big on. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about that because of your own background.
There's two aspects to Mars. The lower aspect is, armies that go off and destroy things. But the other aspect of the warrior, the higher level of the warrior, is the one who defends the weak, the one who brings balance to things. I mean, in the Egyptian myths, Sekhmet was a warrior goddess who defended Ma'at, the balance of the universe. And that's a key, is why are you fighting? What causes, as you say, to fight injustice? Another word for Gabora, or the martial Sephra, is justice. That's that balance. So, what I like about the Templars is that they were protecting pilgrims of all religions and trying to defend this knowledge that if fundamentalists had gotten their hands on it, it would disappear, that sort of thing.
I also find it fascinating that they seem to be, it's said that a good witch can walk in any class of people. This is one of my friends who's a witch, a male witch, and he says a good witch can really relate to all kinds of classes of people. And what it seems like, the Templars were accepted and had power in all classes, from kings to the poor. And to me, that is fairly remarkable to be able to do that, and that.
If you believe everyone is equal, it's easier.
Yeah.
So you're not putting the wealthy on a pedestal or the royalty on a pedestal. Everyone ends up in the same place eventually.
Yeah, but it's really nice to see it enacted. I think certainly I've met people like that in my life that I feel represent that, but to see an order that really did have some success for a while there in being able to show that it's possible. So it's a good role model even now. There are some things about their code. When I think I mentioned before the today's show, is I'd found a translation of the original 72 codes of the Knights Templar, and there are a couple things that were very touching. One was how they took care of their own sick, the dying, and the elderly, the great respect that they had for that, which I feel sometimes the Western culture doesn't have. Certainly Masons do. I know that's part of the Masonic, big part of Masonry. I'm sure part of the modern Knights Templar. But it's some of the code I think you could take now, and anybody could live by it and be a better person.
Yeah, I think the whole tolerance thing in the Masons came from the Templars. You know.
And that is that's a great point, because that is one of the things I really like about the Masons is the tolerance. And there's not, like I said, not again a lot of large groups that have successfully. They do have their shadow, we know that, but they're working it out. There's no group that's perfect, but that's in their sort of their belief system. It's really great.
Yeah, I will be very happy when regular Masons will accept women as equal Masons, since there are many female lodges out there and other traditions that we're all human.
I totally agree, and there certainly is a lot of support for that. As far as eventually that does seem to be going to happen, and it's all things change and women's roles change, and they've been changing for a long time. So it's probably going to happen, could easily happen in my lifetime, I think.
Yeah, and when you look at the history, there have been women Masons since the 1750s in France. I mean, it goes way back.
Yeah, that's another. We had someone come on and talk about some of the co-Masonry, very beginning of our show, a long time ago, and that was really interesting to hear some of. There's a lot that's not really known that's been going on with women in Masonry, and like you said, for quite a long time. And then some of the other orders too, and the degrees. I once collected sort of it was like some sort of a PDF where they had all the different degrees, and I always meant to kind of read through these different degrees that had influences. They were very small, but it's quite complicated, the esoteric history. Well, I mean, it's so rich, and you can get lost in just one aspect of it and still learn a lot. And there's just a lot more out there than I think many people know.
Mm-hmm.
So if people wanted to, you mentioned sort of where to go for the FLO, and what about the Templar Collegiate? What is the best place to contact them?
I think templarcollegia@gmail.com. I'm not there, or send information to me and I can pass it on. You can get to me, diane.zingale@gmail.com. And I can pass it on to people. The group's been growing, and we're all over the place. So and any place where you can get enough people together, you can meet in person, but otherwise people can meet virtually.
I do think their website is templarcollegia.org. It's very simple. So it's TEMPLARCOLLEGIA. But I notice it's just basically you send them an email. It looks like there's not a lot up there. So I guess they will, they'll want to interview, get to know you. There's an application, because they want to make sure that people come in are the same values. Sure. It makes sense. Otherwise, it's not really. It's a waste of everybody's time, I would say, if you're not on the same page overall. So we've got about a little more than 6 minutes to the show, and is there anything more that you wanted to sort of just share about your own journey? Any particular advice about people wanting to start on this journey, or people that are struggling, for instance, like if they're having obstacles? What would you say for any of that?
Well, when the universe presents obstacles, it usually means you need to reevaluate, reconsider, and change. I'm also a cancer survivor, and I can let you know that when I had my first occurrence 11 years ago, it was a wake-up call. It was the universe saying, it's time to reevaluate your life and figure out where you're going. And I did that, and I'm still here, I think, because of it, because it was either get on your path or check out, and I think it's important to take what comes and look at everything that comes to you as the universe dealing with your soul and what you need to do. And if you can get that intuition, it just makes it easier to follow that path.
Wow, that's really amazing. I'm really happy to hear that you survived that. I'm sure that was a big challenge. It's not an easy path for anyone.
Well, it really helped that it was uterine cancer. It really helped that when I was 19, I had met Persephone. So I had lost my fear of death, which is something you get from the mysteries if you meet the goddess of the underworld. So I've had an advantage, I think.
Hmm.
But
Still, that's pretty remarkable.
I'm not afraid of transition, but I'm still here. Yay. I've got work to do.
You have work to do. Yes, it does sound like that. And what is your vision of sort of where you're going right now?
Well, I'm devoting a lot of energy with Fraternity of Hidden Light. I'm, getting ready. We're getting ready to, come out of lockdown eventually. But each person needs to develop their own inner daily practice. As Buddhist, you'd understand that, that concept of your own magical practice of what you need to do to work on what you need to work on. And so my energy these days is working with the FLO, but also, getting, you got to smell the roses, see the sunshine, enjoy, live, and work things, see what comes your way, and then work with it.
I like that advice to remember to live too, because I think anyone in any kind of spiritual path can forget that, actually, not necessarily in a negative way, but sometimes it's good just to simply enjoy life and take the time to notice things. And that also helps me to personally integrate some of the, intense experiences I might be going through on a more spiritual level, just by kind of relaxing into a day-to-day world.
Well, the other thing is your body is your temple. It is your vehicle that you are, it's your spacesuit, as Rosamund would say, that your spirit is working through, is in. So, you take care of it. Exercise, eat well, work on what you need to do to be the best you can be.
I think that's excellent advice. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to want to kind of spend a little more time in the physical world, literally, when the pandemic is truly, truly behind us. I know we're getting closer, but we're still kind of, needing to be careful, and many people are still needing to be vaccinated. So we're getting there. We're making progress.
I'm a big proponent of the vaccine, because that's the key to things opening up. And I think the real key will be when the school kids can get vaccinated too. And so I think that'll lead to the virus being able to be dealt with.
Well, it's already got evidence of that, where they've vaccinated sort of whole groups in some of the homes for the older people, where they've had like no cases, and it's really backed up by facts. And I heartily agree with you. And I think I also am very, very happy they came up with the vaccine so quickly, because it was initially going to.
Well, actually, they were working on the mRNA vaccines for 20 years, because they were trying to do a vaccine against cancers. And that's the only reason it rolled out so fast.
Right.
They had already done the work.
Yes. So we're very fortunate that way. So anyway, I think we are close to the end of our show, and I just want to thank you so much for coming on. It was really enjoyable to have you here, and I've only met you in passing really before, so it's great to get to know you a little more.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm glad for the invitation.
You're most welcome. And thank you all for joining us. And don't forget that you can also learn more about me and Michael at our website, mysticraven.net. We do readings. We have the class coming up, so there's information about the class there. So thank you all for attending today who did attend, and we look forward to next time as we continue to explore the esoteric and the obscure together. Have a great week.